Hey, so it's been a while since I did a video that wasn't just about my transition and was more of a general trans topic video. So I want to talk about how you can be sure that you're trans, if you are or if you are not. And like, just to clarify, this isn't me being like, you're definitely trans and here are all the reasons why you're trans. This is like a how I knew that I was trans, these are the things that help me and they might help you. But at the end of the day, there is the reality and the possibility that you may not be trans. It's not pushing you one way or the other, this is just what helped me. Of course, this will be specific to like female to male transitioning, but hopefully if you are male to female, then you would be able to take something from this as well. Now, I guess the reality of the situation is you can never be 100% sure of anything, but what you can do is look at the evidence and look at how you're feeling and how you feel in relation to other people and just figure it out over time, because that's I think the best way to do things is not to rush into anything, obviously, as well, but not to stop yourself from thinking about something just because it makes you uncomfortable as well. Because I think part of coming to terms with your identity is really like pushing yourself to think about things that might unsettle you a little, and maybe things that you think that you really don't want to do but actually would be best for you in the long run. Now, I know it's anecdotal, but I guess I could just talk about how I sort of vaguely knew that I wanted to transition. For me, it's a lot more simple. I've always felt like male and masculine, like since I was little. Always been tomboyish, as much as I kind of don't really like that word, but I really clung to that word when I was little, because it had boy in it, and it was as closest I could get to being a boy, because I didn't know what trans was, and everything else around me was telling me that I was a girl, even though I didn't feel that way, and I didn't have the words to express that I didn't feel that way. So I'd always felt male. It's not the same for everybody, but I did. But I went to a single-sex school, I went to a girls' school, so like the difference between genders, if you like, wasn't quite so pronounced for me. Obviously I knew boys and I had male friends, not many, and I didn't see them very often, but the difference in like the way that boys and girls are treated and like the experience of true separation, it didn't really hit me until I did, there's a thing in the UK called NCS, and it's essentially they take a bunch of teenagers around GCSE age away for a week, well, a few weeks actually, but the first week is like a camp experience, and you do that, and you do a whole bunch of activities. It's quite fun, I would recommend it, but they separate the camps by boys and girls, and it was the first time in my life that I had actively like been separated from boys, essentially, and they don't let the girls into the boys' camps. You're kept very, very separated, and a point is made of that. You may not go into their camps because... So that was the first time that happened to me, and I ended up having like a really bad mental breakdown during that, because I knew at that point, I was around 15, I knew then that I was trans, but I hadn't really thought much further about it. I hadn't thought about transitioning. I just knew that my gender identity was male and that was it, but I wasn't using a male name and I wasn't using he pronouns, anything like that. I had never been outside, like, and introduced myself as male, you know what I mean? So I had never been outside, I'd never left the house, sounds about right. But yeah, that experience of segregation, like, told me where I felt more comfortable being, where I felt like I needed to be, which was with boys, essentially, even though I still don't like the concept of separation by gender at all, but if I had to be separated into one category or the other, for me it was clearly boys, and it had been like that my whole life, but then I really had the words to express what I wanted, and I found out about what testosterone does as well, and I was like, well, this is what I want. So I guess more generally speaking, the things that you can do to figure out how sure you are of your gender identity and what you want for yourself, what path you need to be taking, is firstly think about how you feel about your voice and facial features, your hips, your height, your like everything that you could possibly compare to people who are cis and the gender that you would prefer maybe to identify as. Think about how you feel in regards to that, which can be really, really uncomfortable and can really like crush your self-esteem, but like having that feeling will tell you what makes you feel comfortable and uncomfortable, and then hopefully that will lead you in the direction of like, well, there are things that I can do to make this better for myself, therefore do I want to do those things, as in transition and take hormones. You also want to think about how often do you think about those things in daily life. Like if you find yourself every single day going, God, I hate my chest, I want to get rid of it, or I don't want to talk to anybody because my voice is too high, or oh, I want to wear those clothes but those will make my hips look really, really wide and I don't want that. If you're thinking about that sort of stuff every day, or even like, you know, every week, or you find you're thinking about them slowly more and more often, like, because obviously I didn't think about those things for a very long time until I sort of realized, well, hey, I don't really feel like a girl, and then, but I spent a while being like, oh, I don't want chest surgery, like I'm fine the way I am. But then I started thinking about it a lot more, and it became like a daily occurrence, and then I bought a binder, and now I can't leave the house without wearing it. And it's that sort of thing that tells you like what you need to do in order to make living your day-to-day less of an inconvenience. And obviously if you're going to bind, do it safely, buy an actual binder, invest. But yeah, try a binder, see if it helps those body issues. And if it does, then that tells you that you had a problem with it in the first place, right? Think about how you see your future. Like, could, say you are female assigned at birth, could you see yourself living as a woman for the rest of your life, 10 years from now? Still being referred to as she and under your current name, does that feel comfortable for you? Or is there something about that that makes you go, I really don't want to do that, actually I'd rather just sort of be in the grave? But that might tell you that maybe you're not comfortable with the way you are right now. So once you've thought about all of that stuff and you think like, well, yeah, I know all of these things make me uncomfortable, but I'm like not ready to just take the step of changing my name, telling everyone to call me a he now, and like that's completely understandable. And again, you should never rush into anything, especially when you're not certain. But even when you are certain, don't, there's no rush. So the things that you can do that are like very non-committal, like you're not making a huge commitment to do these things, but it still helps you. There's still little changes that you can make that you can then implement on a larger scale in the rest of your life if you like are certain about it. You can go on internet chat rooms. I know that they can be dodgy, so don't go sharing all your personal info, but you can go on internet chat rooms, especially ones made for trans people, under a male name and using he, him pronouns, or like, you know, if you're playing a video game or whatever, like grab a username that has a male like name in it, so that other people are referring to you as he, and see how that makes you feel. That's very non-committal. Like if you feel like this makes me feel uncomfortable, and you know what, you could still be trans and it still might make you feel uncomfortable, because adjusting to like a whole new name and a whole new set of pronouns takes a while. Like it can take a couple months for you to actually feel like it isn't weird, because it is weird. You're suddenly being referred to in a completely different way than the one that you have been for your entire life. That's bound to make you go a little like, whoa, you know? So then again, if you're not immediately comfortable with that either, then that doesn't necessarily mean you're not trans. So give it time as well on that one. But I would definitely recommend non-committal ways of using a male name and he, him pronouns, or a female name and female pronouns if you are male to female. Try to find safe spaces for LGBT people as well, particularly if you are younger. Hopefully near you there could be some sort of LGBT group that meets up on perhaps a weekly basis. Anything like that that you can find is super valuable, because you can then go there in real life, use a male name, male pronouns, or whatever name and pronouns you would prefer or like to try using, and they would also, hopefully, if it's truly a safe space, they would be okay with you being like, well, actually I'm going to try this name now and this name now and this pronoun now. In my experience, like I've known loads of people who have come to LGBT groups and they change their names constantly and they change their pronouns constantly because they're just not sure. But you know what, we're just like, that's fine, take the time to figure yourself out, because you will eventually, it's no problem. We'll use whatever name you want and whatever pronouns you want. We'll be patient with you. And that's like the way it should be, really. I know it's harder to do that if you're not really engaged in LGBT culture, which is fine. Like people who aren't LGBT, I guess, don't have to be super engaged. That I feel like they should be accepting, but they don't have to, you know, really immerse themselves in it the way that I choose to, even if they are LGBT. But if you can surround yourself for a little while with people who are immersed in it, then they will most likely be the people who will be the most accommodating of any changes that you want to make, even if they are rapid and erratic changes in terms of names and pronouns. And hopefully at these LGBT groups as well, and if this isn't the case, then you might want to seek this out, try to meet trans people who are already like further along in their transitions, because actually one of the things that also told me how much I needed to go on testosterone was meeting other trans men who had been on testosterone for a few years, who fully pass as cis men, and the jealousy that I felt of them like told me what I wanted for myself. Like I wanted what they had, and that was like a pretty clear confirmation to me of what I wanted. Alternatively, you can watch YouTube videos. I mean, I'm here, and I'll be documenting my transition. That's just me. And there are loads and loads of trans people on YouTube who have documented their transition, who are well, like even 10 plus years into their transition, who talk about all their changes. And you know what, if you look at them and you're like, I want that, then maybe you want that, you know? See a counsellor if you can as well, and talk through and sort through your feelings. Hopefully they would be asking you loads of questions about your gender identity and the way that you see yourself and the way that other people see you, and just talking those things out in real life and not just, you know, with somebody behind a computer screen. Even just a close friend, then just try and like really talk and sort out your feelings, because sometimes you don't really it can be hard to organize those thoughts because it is a very confusing thing. So see if you can preferably talk to a counsellor and have them ask you the questions that make you go, I hadn't thought about that before, but if I were to think about it, I think I'd want this for myself or that for myself. And if the only thing, for example, that is keeping you away from transition would be, oh, but nobody would ever take me seriously as a man or as a woman or whichever one it is, or nobody, my family would be terrible about this, I would lose all of my friends. Those don't mean that you're not trans, those just mean that you're scared of the reaction that you'll get, which is totally valid, and I can relate to that. That's just means that it would be a reason for you to delay something that actually maybe you need. So do consider that as well. Like, thinking that you'll never pass and thinking that it's going to upset the people around you are not things that would make you not trans, because if people could just choose to be not trans because it's an inconvenience to them, then there wouldn't be very many trans people. Another thing that is really good is reading up on all of the effects of HRT, of testosterone or estrogen or whatever. In my case, testosterone. Before I went on testosterone, I obsessively, like whenever I didn't have anything to do, I would obsessively look into the effects of testosterone. Like, obviously, as accounts from other trans men who have already been on testosterone for a long time, but even reading like real medical documents, they explain everything that HRT does in clear terms, because sometimes YouTubers aren't that clear, or they don't tell you everything that's going on because some of the details are just like a bit too much to even like say. That's what I'm finding. There are some things going on that like I don't even really want to talk about or say, that can be quite uncomfortable. So you really need to look into everything that it does. And medical documents, obviously be careful of where you're looking for those documents though, because you could end up reading some stuff written by people who don't really know what they're talking about, or are maybe trying to deter people from transition for the sake of, ew, trans people, disgusting, you know what I mean? The best places to find those documents would be, there are loads of PDFs online, usually written by like gender clinics, like actual NHS gender clinics, or you know, doctors who specialize in this field. I will tell you every single effect that testosterone would have on your body, and if all of those, well, if most of those things sound appealing to you, because believe me, not every aspect of puberty, even if you're cis, is going to be something that you really like and that is really comfortable. Like, I know that this is best for me, but there are some changes that are happening that I'm a bit like, you know, that's normal. It doesn't make me not trans or not in line with my preferred gender identity. It's just something that happens that you just go like, well, you know, it's better than the alternative, which is not having any of it. So yeah, look for PDFs that explain all of the effects, and if most of it sounds appealing to you, and most of it sounds like it would make the prospect of living in the future as male like a lot better for you, and if it sounds like a happy way to live to you, you know what I mean, or a happier way of living. And this is more UK specific, but I have mentioned the NHS a lot, and if you are in the UK, if you think that there is any benefit at all that you could get from like whether gender specific therapy, just talking it out, or like a physical transition, get yourself on an NHS waiting list immediately for a gender clinic, because those wait times are murderous. Go private if you can, but do that if you're more certain, because obviously that path is quite a bit quicker, not by a huge amount. Sometimes there are long waiting lists even for private clinics, but just because you would end up spending money, preferably be more certain before going private, and use the time while you're on an NHS waiting list to really, again, think about like what it is you want out of a transition. But when you get to the NHS appointment anyway, I haven't been yet, but from what I've heard, it's another way to explore your feelings, because they will essentially ask you for your whole life story. That can hopefully clear up some things for you. For me, I was very, very sure of my identity and what I wanted. Like, I went to the private appointment and I was just like, yep, this, I've always felt this, testosterone please. And they were like, well, yeah, that makes sense. Clearly you are trans. But yeah, go to your GP. That's all you have to do. Go to the GP and just explain your feelings and ask to be referred to your nearest gender clinic. I say nearest because you could look at the wait times for each one, but but realistically most of them range from like 2 to 3 years anyway, even if they say on their website it's less. Other than that, I don't think I have much else to say, but just to reiterate the thing that I said towards the beginning, I'm not pushing you one way or the other. You could very well not be trans at all. But the sooner that you do realise it, especially in this country, the better, because you could end up waiting a very, very long time anyway. And I do wish I had realised it sooner, because if I had, then I probably would have only waited 2 months to go to the NHS, right? But again, that time was also valuable for me, because the more frustrated I was getting with not being able to transition, the more it told me how certain I was of my identity and of what I wanted for myself. And that is a pretty good feeling. Because I do know people because some people don't realise they're trans until they're well into their 30s and 40s, and I've met people like that, and I'm glad that I didn't have to have that. So the sooner you can figure it out, the better, but there is still no rush, if you know what I'm saying. But again, you might not be trans. It's all about figuring it out, which is why I recommend those non-committal ways of experimenting with gender, essentially, and experimenting with different pronouns and different names. I didn't speak much about non-binary people in this video. There was a time when I, before realising that I was, essentially a binary trans man, that I thought that I could be non-binary, and I did experiment with they them, but that was a very, very short period, and I quickly realised that for me, it was just sort of like a stepping stone into a male identity. I didn't feel comfortable going all the way there right away. But it's not like that for everybody, and some people are just genuinely non-binary. And the only reason I don't speak on that much is because I don't know a whole lot about it, because I am not non-binary, and I don't want to speak for non-binary people. I can't speak for how I realised I was non-binary if I'm not non-binary. But I do think a lot of these methods would apply to non-binary people as well, if it's just experimenting with a gender neutral name, or whatever name you would like to use, and experimenting with they them pronouns. And once again, it would be sort of LGBT safe spaces that would be the most accommodating in using they them pronouns as well. That's pretty much it, and I'll see you at my 2-month on testosterone video, because that'll happen soon. So yeah.